Mindful Dietitian podcast. I'm Fiona Sutherland, body-inclusive non-diet dietitian and yoga teacher from Melbourne, Australia, and director of The Mindful Dietitian. Please join me as I have important conversations with dietitians and health professionals from all over the world about getting brave and leaning into tough conversations as we cultivate a strong community of practitioners committed to body-inclusive practice. We'll talk about mindfulness, we'll dig into diet culture, and we'll explore ways of bringing courageous and important topics into our professional spaces so we can more deeply understand our own experience and make our work more meaningful. Thank you for joining me. Hi everyone, and welcome back to this next episode of the Mindful Dietitian podcast. Thanks for being here with me today. My conversation today is with Wendy Sterling, who co-authored the book How to Nourish Your Child Through an Eating Disorder, The Plate-by-Plate Approach, which she co-wrote with Crosbie. Now, this is a book that has really revolutionised the way we can implement dietetic care into family-based work in eating disorder treatment. I absolutely loved this conversation with Wendy because having dietitians involved at all levels of care really makes sense to me, and in all models of treatment, it feels really important. It has actually never made sense that dietitians would not be involved in eating disorder treatment, yet we're still seeing it. What I love most about Plate by Plate is that it's no numbers, it's a visual model, and it also circumvents the rigidity of the eating disorder and fast tracks people towards more quote-unquote normalised eating. It's inclusive and suitable for all age groups, although it has been traditionally designed mostly for use with parents and families. Wendy and I talk about how we can use Plate by Plate if families are on wait lists for FBT or mental health support, which is absolutely critical, but it's not always accessible. And again, the wait lists now more than ever. So dietitians are in an amazing position to get in there and do some work. Let me tell you a little bit about Wendy. So Wendy Sterling is a certified eating disorders dietitian and sports dietitian as well. She's a supervisor through IADEP and a board-certified specialist in sports dietetics. She's the team nutritionist of Oakland Athletics and was the former nutritionist for the New York Jets and Golden State Warriors, which my kids were very happy to hear. She is the owner of Sterling Nutrition, a nutrition private practice in the Bay Area, and utilises a non-diet health at every size approach. She is the author of the aforementioned How to Nourish Your Child Through an Eating Disorder. And she and her co-author, Crosbie, created the innovative approach to refeeding called the Plate by Plate. It's been featured in the Journal of Nutrition and Dietetics, which is amazing. Definitely go check that out. Any kind of literature on model of care is just absolutely amazing. Wendy is also the co-author of No Way, A Teen's Guide to Body Image, Food and Emotional Wisdom. She and her co-authors have an upcoming book, due out in late 2021 for parents who want to help their teens with body satisfaction and their relationship to food. Wendy received her BS in Dietetics and Nutritional Sciences from Cornell University, and she earned her master's degree in Nutrition Education at Teachers College at Columbia University, where she also completed her dietetic internship. Oof, thank you so much, Wendy. You are a busy, busy woman, and I'm very grateful to have had this conversation with you. So in 2021, in the coming months, it's now March, I am also thrilled to be collaborating with EDRD Pro on a binge eating disorder training series for dietitians. Registrations will be opening in April 2021. So if you're interested, see www.edrdpro.com for more details. And if you're a dietitian looking for like-minded people, check out the Mindful Dietitian Facebook group. It is a closed group, so I will be asking you some questions, but we have a ton of interesting discussions about weight-inclusive care and dietetic practice. Also at the Mindful Dietitian, you can check out online training opportunities, which are available in both short and longer term form, which include eating disorders just generally, eating disorders in sport, body image, mindful eating skills, and so much more. You can also check out past podcast episodes in the same place, which is www.themindfuldietitian.com.au. So I hope you really enjoy this conversation that I had with Wendy Sterling. She is spectacular and talented in so many ways. I hope this leaves you feeling invigorated and energized if you are a dietitian working in eating disorder care, because Plate by Plate is definitely a model that we should all be familiar with, I believe. So grab your copy of How to Nourish Your Child Through an Eating Disorder at your favorite bookseller, whether that is local or online, or available in ebook form as well. Can't recommend it enough. Hope you really enjoy this conversation and look forward to staying connected. Hello, Wendy, and welcome to the Mindful Dietitian podcast. It is so fantastic to be speaking with you today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So now let's get started with, if you don't mind stepping us through your career as a registered dietitian, maybe pausing at any moments which feel really formative or influential, and then bring us up to what you're doing today.
Sure. I was lucky enough to start my career in New York in a large multidisciplinary eating disorder center in adolescent medicine. I think I thought I was supposed to start my career in clinical nutrition because I was going to check that box, but actually this job was available and I was really eager to be in outpatient care in a multidisciplinary setting, and this was available. And there I saw lots of adolescents. We conducted research, we did indirect calorimetry tests, and I really would say I learned everything I know. It set my foundation up for really what would be the rest of my career up until now. We had tons of physicians and psychiatrists, psychologists, doctors. We were doing just really interesting work. I was working with a lot of athletes there, and it was there that I really broke into sports while I was at this facility, because I got tapped to interview for the New York Jets and I got involved in professional sports, and I was doing both of them simultaneously. So I was doing that. And then at some point I relocated to California for an opportunity in my husband's job. And that's where I came to meet Casey Crosbie, my co-author of How to Nourish Your Child Through an Eating Disorder. We were working together at a partial hospitalization program and worked together, and we're doing this plate model thing that we were doing together. And I kind of looked at her one day and I was like, this is awesome. You know, we need to write this up and develop this further. And we sort of just were side by side in a program together and really built it up. While I was in New York, as I'm in California as well, the ex-Jets general manager had connected me with the Golden State Warriors. And so I was doing some pro sports out in the California area, and then eventually got connected with the Oakland A's, where I am working currently, which is a MLB team. So I'm doing baseball and currently in a private practice and working on books and so on and so forth.
So spare time is at a premium, I'm guessing.
Yes. Oh, and I have 2 kids, by the way. Yes.
Oh yeah, that's
who I love dearly, and I love to spend some time with.
That is fantastic. So, as well as having a very varied career, you have really, you and Casey, what you've done with Plate by Plate is just absolutely, I don't even really have words for it in terms of the way that this has revolutionized. And I don't use that word lightly, because as I've shared with you, I have an FBT training background as well, and very similar to you, I have that sports background as well. And, implementing dietetic work into family-based treatment, we'll just call that FBT from now on, has been somewhat of an enigma, really, in lots of ways. Classically or traditionally in FBT, it's been, said that, the parent knows how to feed the child, and that is true if your child doesn't have an eating disorder, and that is absolutely true if you're not stressed out of your brain about whether your child will eat their next meal, or whether they're able to contain an exercise compulsion, for example. So I would really love, if it feels okay for you, to tell us a little bit about FBT for people who are not as familiar with it as a model, and then how Plate by Plate, or the Plate by Plate approach, supports parents when they are aiming to support their young person through this process.
Yeah, so what you described is exactly spot on. That FBT has this, mandate that parents know best what to do, yet it really offers no formal path. And let me also just add for the listener that it also recommends that there's no registered dietitian involved typically and classically in the journey of somebody undergoing FBT. And the reason for that is because they're saying that parent knows best, and the presence of a dietitian automatically takes away from the expertise of the parent. And so, the suggestion of a meal plan or meal ideas coming from an expert like the dietitian would disempower the parent. And so historically, it's really been left out. And it's been a little bit of a slight to dietitians like myself, perhaps like you, like others who've worked in the field for decades, all of a sudden to then be told, nope, sorry, you can't be involved in this treatment. This treatment is for the therapist and the family only. But what really was happening is I moved to California. FBT was rampant here. Dr. James Locke is right out of Stanford. Dr. Daniel LaGrange is up at UCSF. And there's lots of therapists that are FBT certified. And Casey was doing the plate model at Healthy Teen Project there. And we developed this approach. And really what was happening is that parents were coming to us saying, okay, I know I'm not supposed to come to you. They say don't find help with a dietitian. But the truth is, like, my kid's constipated and they're bloated, and my child needs so many calories, which, just to insert, the process of nutrition rehabilitation for these patients undergoing, for some who need weight restoration, not everybody needs weight restoration, but for those that do, can be 2 times, 3 times baseline. Parents had no clue what to do with that. And even if they did, and they were really nutritionally savvy, like this, as you mentioned, was not like their typical marching orders of feeding their average kid. And so they really felt immobilized. I mean, they were frozen, and there was this psychological crisis, this medical crisis, and they really were coming to dietitians for help. And so we really wanted to try to figure out how to do something that could be compatible, that wouldn't take away or disempower the parents, and really work alongside of the parents to be able to feed their child. And so we really kind of liked that this plate model was non-prescriptive. Our language, our kind of approach was really collaborative. We went in and presented to Daniel LaGrange and his staff, and we really said, hey, these parents are frozen, and what if, rather than disempower, what if actually by the time they're done meeting with us, they actually felt empowered? What if they had more tools, not less? And they went off and they thrived, right? So the plate by plate, really, the reason I think people have liked it is because other approaches like counting calories or exchanges, I'm not sure if the audience, counting calories, I think, is fairly obvious, but exchanges are historically used across treatment centers to re-nourish patients. And what that is it's the diabetic exchange system, which breaks food down into various categories. And so it might make it such that all foods are included, like a brownie could be like 2 breads and 2 fats. But then it gets complicated with recipes or foods from home, or foods can be complicated, like pizza might be 2 breads, 2 meats, a vegetable, a fat. And, and parents were often excluded from that process because they often had no clue what was going on when it came to figuring this out. And sometimes they got manipulated. The kids would, manipulate the numbers a little bit. So, and the other thing that would happen, and in New York, where I used to work, I came from an exchange-based program. And that, what I used to find when I would transition kids off the exchange program is that, because, you're never meant to stay on an exchange program forever. Anyone who does this knows we're transitioning people off. That basically they kind of had these remnants lingering in their mind, kind of long after they were supposed to be doing intuitive eating. So they would look at the plate, and the plate would still look like 3 meats, 2 breads, a vegetable, a fat, kind of looking at that. And so Casey and I said to ourselves, like, well, what if the plate was, just a plate, from the beginning to the middle to the end, right on down to recovery, right? And so we love this idea of just no numbers, no counting, no measuring. And you're just focusing on what's normal, and it can be adjusted, it can be customized, it can be used across cultures. for people who are vegans, vegetarians, lactose intolerant, so on and so forth.
Yeah. Do you know what I love most about it is what you said about circumventing some of the rigidity and some of the counting that is very much, well, usually part of an eating disorder. And, so many of my clients have said, one of the things I regret most is my eating disorder drawing me into the counting, because now I can't have like a counting lobotomy. I almost can't, I can't like erase that from my brain now, even though I desperately want to. And what I have observed is that it develops into its own little form of shame as well. It's like, why can't I stop? Why can't I stop? And that is extremely distressing for people, especially if they are much more psychologically, emotionally, and physically ready to really, really shift away from that. And the effort required is massive. And so what I really love about this is, even for kids and families who have found themselves in that counting mode early on, that the earlier and quicker we can get in there with the normalization of what a plate looks like, or what a serve looks like, then it turns, like you said, the example of the pizza or the brownie being, 2 breads and 2 fats. No, it's a piece of pizza. It's a brownie. That it turns it from nutrients into food, which that's actually what I love most about it, and circumvents all of the kind of the minutiae and the worry of what's in this, and then more concentrates on the whole person and the recovery of the whole person.
Yeah. And I remember when I was just starting at the Healthy Teen Project, which is where I met Casey, and I was working with a patient who had come from the exchanges, and she kind of looked at me as she was trying to figure out how much dressing to put on her salad. And she looked at me and she's like, well, how much salad dressing do I put on? And she expected me to say a tablespoon, but I said, well, what looks normal? Like what's good? And she kind of paused, looked at me and kind of shrugged her shoulders and like put on what looked normal. Right. And it was kind of early on in her recovery. And I just thought, like, yes, like this is it. And like, for me, even as a provider, I will never look back, like ever. Right. The thought that it could have been a tablespoon for her. And I think that's what happens with exchanges, is that it will always be a tablespoon for those people who did a tablespoon with dressing. And I don't know about you, but like, have a salad with me one day and it will never be a tablespoon. it's like dressing on the side. Oh, and can I get some extra, please?
Yes. Yeah. And also honors the way different people like to, for example, dressing or spreads or things like that, over time we can honor, the volume of whatever that tastes good, that feels good, that feels satisfying, and to be able to start that attunement process as early on as possible. And so, I mean, this is a beautiful example of when people say, oh, intuitive eating comes later, which I don't subscribe to at all. There are aspects of becoming more aware of what we need and want, remembering that want is different to need. And, we all can have access to pleasure in food. And that there are parts of that you just spoke about. That is one aspect of what we would describe of intuitive eating. Well, I don't know what feels good, what feels satisfying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What looks normal, even, and which is great.
Yeah, like does a single scrape of peanut butter, does that really is that really what you would serve someone else?
Right.
Yeah,
right. No. Nope. So when we show plates, we really try to make sure that they're full, the plate is full, that it looks balanced, that they look yummy. I mean, Casey and I talk all the time about this word of yummy. When we show waffles and syrup, people will say to us, well, what food group is syrup? And we're like, in the yummy category. I mean, that's in the yummy food group. It isn't a food group. I don't know, I mean, you can't have waffles without syrup. So,
no.
Yeah.
It's in the compulsory on waffles food group. I'm not sure.
Exactly.
I mean, that's a beautiful example of the way that, I mean, even culturally or, traditionally, how there are some foods that go together. And
Yes.
I don't mean that as an obligatory kind of thing, but more like, okay, waffles and syrup. Like, we're not going to go necessarily waffles and, Vegemite, which is a traditional Australian spread, very salty, very tasty, but not waffles. Like, that is white bread and butter is Vegemite. And, so kind of coming back to, matching foods together that, that kind of fit in terms of taste and texture. And that's one thing about in the book, in Plate by Plate, I'll just call it Plate by Plate, but it's actually How to Nourish Your Child Through an Eating Disorder.
Yeah.
The Plate by Plate approach. And what I really like about it is you give very concrete examples of what different plates could look like, what a plate that isn't full looks like, what a plate that isn't well matched looks like. And what I really like about the way that you and Casey have delivered these sections, very non-judgmental. It's like, well, if you want to have jelly, zucchini and like mashed potato with butter and salt, as it's, kind of designed to be, and then a piece of fish, well then, okay, but, let's take a step back here and think, well, that could be ticking all the food groups. I didn't even check through it in my head. It's not, obviously, but, it's, but let's have a think about how this goes together. Would you serve this up to a friend who came for dinner, or would they be like, what's this interesting mix of food on my plate?
Right. Yes. And cohesiveness is something that we talk about. And I will say with FBT, we tend to see that happen, that being less of an issue, because typically we see that parents do a really good job making sure the plate is really cohesive. But we do this plate by plate approach one-on-one with clients and adults all the time. And we tend to see that when someone's doing it themselves, it can be the case that they are trying to tick the boxes, but that can sometimes happen, that you kind of end up with this random assortment, not necessarily because of plate by plate. It can be a combination of, I'm trying to tick the boxes, and also my brain is not thinking in terms of, oh, I should just put that all on a sandwich and take a bite. They're thinking kind of still a little disordered, like I'm doing everything I can to try to avoid the sandwich. So instead I'm going to take, and this is a real picture I can picture in my mind of a client of mine, where she had like turkey slices and then like bulgur and then like some coleslaw and some, avocado. And I was just thinking, can't we just make a sandwich, and like, just, I don't know, it seemed to me like an avoidance of trying to do that. And so sometimes our job is to also help people get back to, where they used to be prior to the onset of the eating disorder. And it's not that I know all the answers of how they're supposed to be eating, but once upon a time, prior to the invasion of the eating disorder, there was comfort and peace and freedom. And we usually try to get people back to that.
Yes, of course. I love that. It's perfect. Now, one of the things that's happening here in Australia, and I've no doubt at all it's happening worldwide, is that wait lists for FBT have really blown out. Just this week, I was in a meeting with other eating disorder specialist dietitians, and there was only about 12 of us in the meeting. So we're not talking about gold standard kind of research here. We're talking about a complete straw poll. But interestingly, of the 12 people there, I think all of the major Australian cities were actually, by some miracle, were represented, which is really interesting and just pure luck, really.
Wow.
And the shortest wait time seemed to be around 3 months, and that's in my city, right? But the longest wait time was up to 6 months for FBT. And of course, I know it's completely heartbreaking. And of course, what you and I and people listening might know about FBT is that one of the early aspects of it is really emphasizing the urgency of getting onto it. And all I can think of is these poor families being put on a wait list, and then in session one having the urgency conversation. And I'm thinking to myself, what a kick in the teeth. Like, what a kick in the teeth. And so I've been telling all my supervisees and my local Australian community about Plate by Plate since the book came out, because I'm just such a massive fan of it. And I've been it's really amazing. And I will kid you not, in the past month, I have basically said to people, if you do not have this book, you need it. I will order it for you. I will send it to you, because these families need help now. Even if you're not FBT trained, like, sign up for it, fine, whatever. But like, we need to really be helping people now, and not be getting drawn into this idea of, oh, dietitian not welcome. These families need help. Yeah. This book is a fantastic resource for us to be able to step us through. So anyway, that little vent over. Thank
you for your support.
Yeah. So my question for you with that little rant kind of, or that heartbreaking experience, really, this is very real, and it's continuing to go on today.
Yeah. And it's global. It's really a global, just to piggyback off that. And I've been following kind of this effect of COVID, which has been devastating globally. I mean, we're seeing exponential increases in eating disorders in the UK. There are headlines saying, there's a surge, 66% increase in Ireland, headlines saying that. And then there's studies out in Saudi Arabia about increased eating disorders and emotional eating. And we're seeing it in the United States. I mean, all across, I'm seeing it in the Bay Area. And so this is a global trend.
Mm-hmm. No, undoubtedly. So my question for you, Wendy, is, if somebody, let's just pose this picture. A dietitian, not necessarily FBT trained, has perhaps some familiarity, is willing to also be supervised, which is a very important part of working in eating disorders in general, I would say, across the board. But, for this situation in particular, working with young people, working with families, working with vulnerable groups. Could you give us an example of how a dietitian could maybe start with using the plate-by-plate approach? If they're working with a family, maybe you've got a GP on board, that's fine, but they're on a wait list for FBT. And the assessment has been that, yes, this is a family who is suitable for FBT, so we're just going to pop them on the wait list. And it's just not possible. It's just not possible to have a therapist on board. How could we use the plate-by-plate approach?
Yeah, I love you putting in all those qualifiers for me, because you're calming all my anxiety about, like, they're on the wait list, they've got a GP, you've already ticked a lot of my boxes, so I can just go into the plate by plate. So it's actually a really easy approach to use. I mean, first, in terms of just straight up following it, we usually talk about using a 10-inch size dinner plate. And, a dinner size plate. So we're not talking about a toddler size plate or a bowl. Our eating disorder patients love to hide their food in bowls. And so we're really asking to kind of see what's going on the plate. And then we're asking them to plate all 5 food groups. And I often see kids having for breakfast yogurt and blueberries, or a banana, or toast and butter and Vegemite. Well, I don't get the pleasure of seeing that, but I'm imagining in Australia you might have some that are just doing that. Or is that more of an afternoon snack? I don't know.
Traditionally breakfast. Look, anytime. I'm not going to argue with the audience about when Vegemite is appropriate. It's a much contended discussion.
Yes,
but traditionally breakfast. Toast.
Yes. So you might be seeing these breakfasts that are missing, key food groups. And so we're asking not only that parents begin to plate all food groups, but that they're also plating these meals that are full. And so, and I show examples as I'm going through, educating parents, that examples of plates that maybe have all 5 food groups, but are tiny on the plate. Like, they're not filling out all the plate, right? So just things to watch out for. And then we talk about a roadmap. How many meals? Always it's 3. And then how many snacks? So if the kid is doing 1, I try to let the parents, as a la FBT, to kind of say, oh, well, we're trying to increase, we should go to 2. And so I kind of let them be the ones to make that next call. Either they go to 2 or they go to 3, depending. And then we always emphasize variety, which is a very key fundamental aspect of this plate by plate approach. I do that right from the beginning, because I really want them to know that oatmeal every day, or whatever it is going to be every day, is part of the eating disorder, or part of the safety associated with the eating disorder. And so a lot of times the parents will say, oh, but they're just eating it, and they're just going to do that. Or the kid will say, but I just love, my toast and butter, or my cereal, or my oatmeal. And, a lot of that just kind of doesn't rock the boat and keeps everyone happy, but it keeps the eating disorder breathing and alive. And we want to really say, and I do this with the family. Okay, variety is important. Getting in all 5 food groups are important. So what are some other ideas we can do to just get the variety muscle working and the adventure beginning, right? And so sometimes it's challenging depending on where the kid might be, but we try to do that together. We also talk about foods that the child used to like, or the teen used to like before the onset of the eating disorder, to get them thinking that way. Oh, they used to really like tortellini, like she won't touch it, And so just trying to think about, and this isn't something I'm saying, go do tortellini. It's more like, what does the parent feel in their gut, given what we're talking about with the importance of variety, that they might be able to try next, right? Or they might be able to introduce. We always talk about cohesiveness, which you've heard us talk about. And then we sort of just do this review. And one thing I will say before I launch into the teaching is, I always, as a dietitian, as I'm sure most dietitians listening do, is we're always assessing in the beginning, just what is the kid doing, and how is the kid hydrating and drinking, and what's the caffeine like, and are they binging, purging, what are their energy requirements? Because we do have 2 versions of this plate by plate approach. One is a plate that is comprised of 50% starch, 25% protein, 25% fruits and vegetables. And then the other plate is a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 plate, where it's just 1/3 starch, 1/3 protein, and then 1/3 vegetables or fruit. And both plates have dairy, and both plates have fats. And for the most part, I will say that most of our teens really do well on that 50% plate. That, that plate is really for active teens. It's for anyone undergoing weight restoration. It's for anyone doing intuitive eating.
Growing.
It's exactly.
Like
growing.
that.
Yes, exactly. And that's why I would say, like, far and away, most of our teens are doing that. But sometimes we use that 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 plate for younger kids, or for somebody just as a gateway. Like, maybe when I do my assessment, their intake is so insufficient that the parent might feel like it's such a huge jump to jump there. And so sometimes that's fine. We'll just use an interim plate. Or if there's vomiting and it's really difficult for them to, keep the food down, we'll use it as an interim plate as well. So all of that is going on. And I literally in session bring up my Instagram, or I have PowerPoints, but for the most part, I use my Instagram more so now. I used to have these PowerPoints and I would go through, and it's just easier now. Now that I can share my screen and whatever. And I go through visuals. So I'll bring up, like, what breakfast, what are target breakfasts, and what are target lunches, what are target dinners, and what are some examples of snacks, which, by the way, snacks would be a couple of food groups paired together to make a complete snack.
This is so practical and helpful. So thank you so much for kind of stepping us through that. So in the, for example, in the first 3 sessions where you're really setting the foundation along with the family, forgive me for getting into a little bit of the nitty gritty, but I get a sense of what people will ask. So things like, would you have the whole family? Would you be aiming to have the whole family there, including the young person? Would you want to be meeting with the parents? Would you ever meet with the young person on their own? Like, what would the room itself look like?
I tend to have the parents and the patient. I almost don't usually ever have siblings there for at least what I'm doing. And typically as we move forward, I would say I either have both parents and the kid, and or one parent and the kid, but I almost always have the parents and the kid for this work, because the parents are doing the feeding. The only exception to that would be if I'm not doing FBT type parent-led meals and I'm doing this plate-by-plate approach with someone who's 18 or 20 or 25 or a young adult, that would be kind of the only exception there.
In which case you would do it more traditionally, like you're working with an adult, but you're using this particular approach with the adult.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Got it. I can see it just being so helpful right across the spectrum, to be honest.
Yeah. And I use this visual approach, interestingly, often with my non-eating disordered athletes as well, because it makes sense. When I was at the Jets, there was a chiropractor who came on board, who started doing this macronutrient counting with our guys. And, some people were very keen on that. And there was this whole thing. And I was never into that. And I can tell you that many of the guys, even at that level, they were like, they were confused. Like they weren't into that either. And so, just visually to be able to show a guy, on a line, what his plate looks like, or what's a good, range. And these guys are intuitive eaters, and so you show someone kind of roughly what a good combination of foods are. It kind of makes a lot of sense. And then intuitively let their body decide, when to stop.
Well, as you and I know, Wendy, and a lot of other people out there who are listening to this know that, disordered eating attitudes, experiences and behaviours are definitely rife in the sports setting. So being able to integrate any of the more normalising, supportive approaches is absolutely going to be helpful across the board.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, all right, what's my next question about this? I'm trying to channel all the questions that dietitians will ask about this. All right. So, the other aspect of working with families, of course, is the behavior of the eating disorder itself, or the strategies that the eating disorder uses. So, but just to clarify for people, what I'm speaking about here is separating out the young person and their true selves from the eating disorder. So the eating disorder might be very rigid, very controlling, very demanding, we might say the eating disorder is on the edge, on the side of manipulative. The young person themselves is compassionate and kind and thoughtful. And so I just want to clarify for people, when I say eating disorder, I am not talking about the whole young person here. I'm talking about the way in which the brain changes as a result, and as a result, behaviors change here. So that's the other side of it for dietitians, isn't it? Is that typically, not always, but typically eating disorders not super happy about plate by plate, not super enthusiastic, would you say? I mean, let's give people a little bit of a snapshot about, what we might expect if we're working with families here, because the last thing I would really want dietitians to think is, oh, well, we'll just do this and it'll all be good. And the young person they'll be fine with it. Yeah, no, they're probably not going to be fine with it. So how do we support them?
Yeah, well, I think that goes for any increase in volume when you're working with eating disorders. I mean, they're never psyched about it typically, and it's always difficult, hence the eating disorder. I mean, it's always difficult, but what I will say is that the feedback we've gotten has been really positive after they've gotten the hang of it and after they've gotten used to it. And comfortable with it. I'm trying to think, nothing specific is coming to mind, imminently, but I feel like we really do get people who are like, they say things. Even just today on Instagram, somebody was like, initially these plates looked huge, they were overwhelming, but now I'm like, wow, I can eat this. I really can. The eating disorder has receded enough that I'm like, this is normal. This is what I eat. So I think initially, the truth is that anything that's more than what somebody is currently doing is intimidating. And so what's nice in the outpatient setting is that it depends on someone's degree of severity, but often I think we can inch someone along, in a way that feels comfortable if we have that luxury. And by that, I mean, it just sort of depends where the person's at. And so if they can do it, often what comes with it, and where I try to motivate someone, is to get them back into their life. So for example, if it's an athlete I'm working with, often they are tired, they are weak, they've lost strength, they are not making gains, they've been benched because they're slower now. And what's awesome is when they start doing this and they're now setting personal records. And I can't tell you how many I have. The joys of being a sports nutritionist doing this work. I mean, it is an added benefit to doing this work on top of eating disorder treatment, doing this on top of that, because I get to see the benefits tangibly in sports performance that occur. And so I think that's the in, right? I mean, it's never fun for someone, but things have happened that have landed them here that are taking them out of their life, academically, college is on the horizon, socially, whatever may be the case, that hopefully, though difficult, this is really their gateway and their ticket to life, to freedom, to wellness, to strength, to power, to explosiveness. And so hopefully we really try to use that, even though it's scary.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking of the scenario that I kind of mentioned before, and that is that any kind of psychological support is on the horizon. We're not too sure because a wait list is a bit of a nebulous thing. It could be 1 month, it could be 3 months. They've been told 3 months, it could be 1. We're not too sure. And that uncertainty is just so tough for people. So I'm thinking of the situation where a dietitian is, well, along with a GP, is kind of being left to hold the proverbial baby, so to speak, and that when parents are kind of struggling, not having that FBT style of containment and really beautiful, warm support, can really leave the GP and the dietitian with a bit of a task, really, in terms of helping parents really come to terms with what to expect in terms of, moving forward, because it's definitely not part of our foundational training. It's traditionally, well, even with FBT, this is not, unless we are the primary therapist or primary worker with a family, that we're not used to being able to speak with parents about she won't do it, they won't do it, what if he refuses, what if they sit there for 2 hours, what if this, what if that. And I think that's maybe where a lot of dietitians, if we are in this scenario which I am painting, which I desperately hope won't last, I think this is where we kind of get a bit, I don't know that we get stuck, I just think it's really hard, and all of us are up to our eyeballs already in clients. I know I'm painting a little bit of I'm not a pessimist. I feel like I'm painting a little bit of a worst case scenario picture, but I feel like that's kind of where we're at the moment, is real talk. We don't have that support. So how do we kind of have those conversations with parents?
Do you mean, when you say how do we have those conversations, do you mean like you and I, or do you mean, yep. I mean, I think that the reality is I might not have it with them in advance, but if it does happen, we always tell parents that if they're not finishing, to offer them like an Enter Plus or a meal replacement. Usually meals should be, we say half an hour, and that snack should be about 15 minutes. FBT, it might linger longer. So you might set maybe an hour for a meal and a half an hour for a snack. But at some point we call it, you sort of just say, okay, this is going on for a while. I'm so sorry you didn't finish your meal. And unemotionally, you offer 2 Enter Pluses, which is the equivalent. I don't know if you have Enter Plus over there. I'm sure you do.
We do.
Global. So we would say, okay, 2 Enter Pluses for this meal. And that's that. And then 1 Enter Plus for a snack. And we would just sort of do that so that it's not going on forever. And the expectation is they would drink the Enter Plus. And over time, if somebody's really unable to be compliant with even that, then we really start talking about a higher level of care. We really start talking about, okay, this really isn't working. And then maybe somebody needs to be in a residential facility or an inpatient unit at that point if they're not able to get their direct nutrients in, because if by that point they're not eating the meals and they're not taking the Ensure Pluses, then I really start to wonder, are they losing weight? Are they becoming medically unstable?
Right.
What is actually happening? So either they could be looking at a medical hospitalization or potentially a residential facility.
Yes. Oh my gosh, we could so go down that path again of, people for whom that's available, people for whom that's not available. But rather than going down that path, because we could continue on with this like forever for sure. I would love to just change tack slightly and ask you a little bit about, obviously you and Casey have this vision of how Plate by Plate can really help not only young people, but also whole families to begin to put back together their relationships with food and eating and even body image, because, we can't kind of disentangle those from one another. So I'm curious about how you envision Plate by Plate as being really pivotal in helping to put these families kind of back together in their relationships with food and eating.
Well, we're a big fan of family meals. And what we find happens is that all of a sudden when we start in family-based treatment, or we start with the Plate by Plate approach, and we're asking families to eat alongside of their children, suddenly the parent that kind of was skipping lunch or that wasn't really eating breakfast suddenly is sitting down with their child eating breakfast. And so it brings families together for meals. And we know that there are so many benefits associated with meals, support and boundaries, and helps, foster identity and improve self-esteem and all kinds of things. And so kids are, able to, and families are on this regular schedule. And we also know that family meals can really help with eating disorder prevention, even before you're in this situation. So the idea of just being on a schedule of family meals anyway is actually therapeutic and beneficial, because parents can see what's on their kid's plate or what is not on their kid's plate. And that can actually be really helpful.
So for it could be hypothesized that in some families, there is some transgenerational transmission of particular attitudes around food and eating and bodies. And what I see so strongly through Plate by Plate is this opportunity for transgenerational healing. That, when grandma is over and seeing, what is being plated up, or, Auntie Martha, or the next door neighbor, or extended family and friends, and communities, and how this is just the normalization of what goes on your plate that is culturally appropriate, that is in line with families' ethics and family traditions and so forth. That how the vehicle of food and eating is so incredibly healing. And I know that seems a little bit perhaps trite or a little bit odd to say, but so much healing does come through the vehicle of food. It's interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there is some healing in, we often want the whole family to eat the same. And so ideally, when possible, there's no different food for that sibling or that sibling. Everybody might have different amounts, as would be expected, because everybody's different. And but ideally, as much as possible, there would be the same food there. And so that also teaches that all foods are okay. And I think it normalizes the acceptance of eating across the family.
Yeah. And grandma, if you're coming over for dinner, you get a plate too. Here's your plate.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Totally.
I think that's so wonderful. Now, on exciting news, another one of the books that you have that you co-wrote with Signa Darpinian and Shelley Agarwal, which is called No Way. I have heard little whispers that the three of you have got a new book coming out. So I would love it if you don't mind maybe giving us a little bit of a sneaky peek into what people can expect in your new book.
Yes, we've been having a blast writing this parent book. It's a parent version of No Way. No Way was a book for teens that the three of us wrote. Signat Opinions, an adolescent therapist. Dr. Agarwal is an adolescent medicine doctor. And the three of us teamed up in No Way to talk about emotion, sleep, a non-diet approach to food. And all of that was circular, all really important in building confident eaters. And we're so happy to be talking about these things for parents because we work so much with parents. And it's been fun because we've included some new things like the importance of food diversity and creating a friendship with food and body and teaching parents to teach their kids to be critical viewers of the media. And so we've gotten some extra bits in there. And so it's been great, writing that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Is there a date in mind when it will be released?
We think it's going to be out the end of this year. So hopefully, wow, if all goes well, we'll have it in 2021.
Oh, that is so fantastic. And, when I'm on listservs or Facebook groups, this is No Way often will pop up as a book that is recommended. And the three of you coming from three different kind of professional backgrounds just provides that richness, which young people, I'm sure, would, really relate to. It's not a nutrition book. It's not a fluffy self-care book. It actually is, it's written, if I can say, you can really tell that the three of you have really channeled your inner teen in writing it. It's, it's really cool. I love it.
Yeah, it's written for teens and it's like bite-sized chapters that are really easy to digest for the kid. And there's workbook kind of exercises for them. And we're going to try to do the same. We are doing the same for parents where, we're not going to write it like in teen language. But although if Signa had her way, she would do it that way. Yeah.
The workbook style is really fantastic because what it does is invites us to just pause and then contemplate rather than that or the automaticity really of just read. It's like pause, reflect, make some notes.
Yeah.
I really like that. I'm imagining, if there's anybody here from education, they're like, well, duh, that's how learning works. But I do think it really deepens our self-reflection and our capacity to, make any changes or make any shifts.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so excited. So, Wendy, what I would really love just to round us out here is for you to tell people listening where they can find more about you and more about your books and where you are located, not so much geographically, but more on the web.
Great. I have a website, sterlingnutrition.com, and you can find me on Instagram, Wendy_Sterling, and also at Plate by Plate Approach. Sorry, I think that's what the hashtag is. And we also just launched a website, platebyplateapproach.com. So, and I'm on Twitter but I don't think you want all that. I mean, maybe you do, but I'm on those things as well. Yeah. So
Twitter's a weird place.
It is. Yeah. I'm much more, on, Instagram, but I'd love to see you all.
Well, the thing is, like you referred to before, if you're pulling up your Instagram, and showing photos from Instagram, that is immediately going to pique the curiosity of the young person in the room. They're like, oh,
yes.
Oh, hello,
yes.
Instagram.
Yeah, they do like it. But it's funny because right after our Plate by Plate approach came out, Casey and I were like, we should have an Instagram for the book. It was like after the book came out. And then we did that. And then we looked at each other. We're like, how do we get followers? Like we had no idea. I felt so old. Like I really had no idea. And then we started posting and like kind of figured it out. But that was in 2018. It really wasn't that long ago. So I'm hence not really knowing my handle. So
Right. Well, these days, unless you're like TikToking as well, or
we started a TikTok. I did it once, but I haven't I did it once, but I haven't done a second one. And so I said to Casey, we're on TikTok, and she's like, what? And then I'm trying to get her to like do another one, but don't ask. I don't know what I'm doing, really.
Yeah. I don't think any of us, let's get real. None of us know exactly what we're doing. We're just like throwing stuff out there. And if it resonates, great. If it doesn't, leave it. Like, okay, all good. Right. Good. Yeah. Wendy, it has been such a pleasure talking with you. You are just such a foundation, a fountain of wisdom and knowledge and experience. And I feel very sure that people listening will now have a better understanding about Plate by Plate and how it kind of fits in with nourishing, particularly young people, but all across the age spectrum and culture, gender spectrum as well. I will say again, I can't recommend this book highly enough. I'm very, very fussy with books I recommend, or with resources in general that I recommend. And this one is one of the best for sure. So anybody, any dietitians listening, any dietitians listening who are wondering, whether you should get it, the answer is yes. Don't hesitate. Just grab the book. And also, what I've been telling my supervisees is that when they do their first kind of intake, maybe even before they've met with a family, is request that the family order the book. That's what I've been telling people, is the family order the book. You've got the book. It is okay to go through it with them. It doesn't make you less professional. It doesn't, in fact, it enhances our professionalism to be standing side by side with families. So just a little tip, I think people find that really helpful, is the family to read it, or start reading it and then work through it together. So all the pictures are there, all the kind of so-called kind of instructions are there. It's a really beautiful support. So thank you.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for sharing it with your listeners.
Yeah, it's my absolute pleasure. So I look forward to keeping in touch, and you have a wonderful rest of your day and week.
Thank you.
Well, that's our episode of the Mindful Dietitian interview series for today. Thank you so much to our wonderful guest and to you for listening. I really hope you enjoyed it. Just a reminder that you can find me over on the website www.themindfuldietitian.com.au, and please join actually quite a large group of wonderful and enthusiastic dietitians on the closed Facebook group, The Mindful Dietitian. The music you hear is called Happiness from Ben Sound, used under the Creative Commons license. Have a great day, everyone.